All right. Good evening, everyone. Thank you for joining us for the webinar. Tonight, we're going to hear from Dr. Alan Atkins. I look forward to introducing you to him here in just a few moments. Please note that tonight's presentation will be recorded. While everyone's still logging on, I want to go ahead and take a moment to introduce myself. My name's Ashley Pichard, and I'm the Program Relations Specialist here at Practice Match. Before joining Practice Match, I was an in-house physician recruiter, and in that role, I developed a true passion for helping physicians in their journey from training to employment. With Practice Match, I get to take that passion to the next level by offering career guidance and mentorship to physicians from medical school students preparing to apply for residency, all the way through helping residents and fellows find their dream job. Hopefully, since you're here tonight, you already know about Practice Match and all that we have to offer physicians. If not, I want to highlight a few of the resources my team and I have available to you to make sure you get the most out of your Practice Match experience. We have a free CV builder and free expert CV review, scholarships. We have a job board where you can see job postings and filter them by specialty, geographic location, visa status, student loan repayment, and more. We have virtual career fairs to connect you with employers hiring in your specialty. You can earn some additional revenue during training for attending them, and even more additional revenue by becoming a physician promoter and encouraging your colleagues to attend. We have monthly webinars on various topics regarding training, interview preparation, contract negotiation, immigration assistance, loan repayment, and more. And if you think your program would benefit from a personalized training on any topic mentioned above, we can do that too. We have a free physician immigration handbook provided by Sisk and Susser, a physician practice path career guidebook, and we also have a network of experts in just about every physician-facing industry. So if you ever have a question related to career guidance, you can reach out to Practice Match and we will be happy to guide you. If you have any of the, if you have any questions about any of the things I mentioned above, please feel free to reach out to me. Please note that microphones will be muted throughout the presentation. We have a special snafu tonight because a few more people got the panelist invite than normal. So if you received a panelist invite from Dr. Atkins, please be sure to mute your own mics to help us out, but I'll be monitoring that as we go through. We'll have time for a Q&A session at the end. So if you have any questions related to tonight's topic, please feel free to ask them in the Q&A box. Now, let's learn more about living your best life as a physician by prioritizing your happiness. Dr. Alan Atkins is a psychiatry resident in California. He attended med school at Brown University and is about to start fellowship at University of Colorado. Dr. Atkins founded a research lab studying nature-based therapies as alternatives to incarceration. And he is a host on the radio show, and podcast Let's Get Psyched, which challenges psychiatry norms. In his spare time, Alan finds meaning in improv comedy, meditation, and backpacking. It's my pleasure to introduce Dr. Alan Atkins.
Thank you, Ms. Pichard. I appreciate it. Can you hear me okay?
Yep, can hear you fine. I'm going to go ahead and mute myself and turn it over so we can hear this not yoga session.
Okay. So yeah, I sent the, I think to at least half of the people that I invited, I sent the presenter link. So there'll be many clones of me, and I'm embarrassed, and it's fun. So this talk is called Doctor Life, Freedom, Not Handcuffs. I thought about quite a few names for it, and some of them included Commodified Wellness or Rethink Your Stupid Doctor Life, and we'll talk about why. So I'd like to thank Ms. Pichard. I'd like to thank Practice Match, also the other doctors that helped contribute to this presentation. This is my podcast. If you're interested in listening, that's what it looks like. So what this talk is, it's novel both for me and hopefully for you. This isn't a talk like any other talk that I've given, in the sense that I didn't look at a bunch of journals to make this talk. While it is informed by some journal articles and most of the assertions I make that are actual assertions rather than opinions are evidence-based, there are a lot of opinions here. And so I think that will make the talk interesting, and it makes me particularly nervous today. And I'm going to enjoy that. I think this talk will be challenging and also incomplete in the sense that I kind of set out to construct this narrative on my own, and I haven't seen a whole lot of other narratives like this in academic medicine, at least. So I'm also inviting afterwards for anyone who wants to contribute their thoughts on how this can be honed to do so. What I hope this talk isn't is condescending and just telling you about yoga, meditation, and hiking, which I love all of those. And I'm aware that you're aware that those exist and don't need a wellness talk to know that. So the first thing I want to invite everyone to do is to think about why medicine. So what actually made you go into medicine? I think for me, I think that the common answer that kind of unites everyone is to help people. But there's other answers. Overwhelmingly, we go into medicine for these altruistic reasons. There's also freedom, whether that's financial freedom or freedom to procrastinate longer on choosing a career until you have to pick a residency, freedom to be able to work internationally and have your work be valuable. So this is a cute little fish that we'll call medicine fish. And just like medicine fish, we swim in water, and just like medicine fish, we don't know what water is. It's like an existentially radical idea that there might be this thing called water, because we've never seen anything other than what the water looks like. And so if our water were to be toxic and polluted, we would have a very hard time knowing. Like, we could be swimming in Gatorade and we wouldn't know, because we've never seen anything else since we were born as baby little med student or pre-med fish, and for the last many years. I'm just going to check what okay. So the problem with that sort of necessitates a physician wellness talk is a very obvious problem. Physicians are not doing well. And yet I feel like I have to at least characterize it a little bit, because we're fish and we're not seeing this water all around us. We're taking it for granted. All right. So let's start with the suicide rate. Right, we've heard this described in many different ways in wellness talks ad nauseum. Twice the rate of the average population of other professions of the average population, and you can kind of go into all kinds of other statistics for physicians that don't look great. You can see here some factors that contribute are the duty to the patient, unpredictable schedules, often including night shifts, unconventional hours, fatigue. And here this graph just shows physicians compared to other workers in terms of whether they get enough time for their personal life. 45% of physicians are reporting burnout symptoms at some point. So we're pushing ourselves really hard, and that's an internal problem, right? So risks of physicianhood internally are overworking habits that we learned in medical school, a self-worth based on those overworking habits, loss of creativity in the living of life. So while our peers were out in backpacking Europe or doing their undergraduate liberal arts classes involving basket weaving and cultural anthropology, we were taking organic chemistry, which I venture to say hasn't done a whole lot for us. And we've lost a lot of opportunity there to kind of innovate who we want to be as creative livers, because we were busy having to compete for medical school admission. So the risk that results from this is overshooting the good life. So in terms of diminishing marginal returns, we are at great risk for having much less time than what would make someone happy, and much more money than we actually need, partly because we don't have time to spend that money. Of course, this is along the lifespan. I am not currently in that position myself. nor I think are many of the resident folks here, at least. Okay. So we're pushing ourselves really hard, and that's the internal. And just like the water, which exists within us and without us, there is also a lot of external pressure. So it's kind of amazing that things are better than they have ever been. And so, you know, the ACGME has instituted work hours, and beyond just residency, doctor life is easier. And because it's easier than it's ever been, it's considered, there's like kind of like, oh, what are you complaining about vibe, which is a major problem because we have basically the, among, I don't know, top 3, top 5 most toxic cultures in US professions. And so just some examples, ACGME minimum maternity leave right now is 6 weeks, which is supposed to be considered some kind of really humane thing. Yeah, I don't have to talk about resident pay. We're somehow proud of the fact that we're limited to work 80 hours per week, as if that's a major thing. And that was only done because of a patient death. That wasn't done because doctors weren't doing well. And residency sets the tone for then what our expectations are for the rest of our careers. So if we're willing to do these things as residents, we're often willing to do slightly less than that, but still similar as attendings. So the water is all around us, the water is inside us, and we have to be able to notice it to do something about it. So it's costly to hire more doctors. And why do that when you can kind of use the fact that doctors have this toxic overworking culture to get them to do more work? That comes naturally and easy to place the onus on doctors. And it's unnatural and difficult for doctors to say no. And we'll talk about why. But I think we should be careful assigning blame because, well, for me, partly, I don't know who's to blame. I think it's an extremely complex system. There's a lot of people profiting off of folks that are overworked and making less, but we don't exactly know always who they are. And we're all kind of complicit in this. I mean, like we already talked about, a lot of this is within us, and we're holding ourselves to these standards. Patient volume should be a shared duty. So doctors should be, working to see as many patients as they can reasonably see and still be well and still do a good job. But hospitals should also be willing to hire more doctors. Unfortunately, there's different incentives at play here. So let's look at on the left side of the Venn diagram, I have kind of my own guesses at why the hospital might care about physician wellness. So lower physician wellness means turnover and therefore lower profits. And then in the middle of the Venn diagram, we have things that both the doctor and the hospital care about, or the employer care about, like lawsuits, adverse events, and quality of service actually is related to work satisfaction for physicians. But then we have the list of why we care. So for us, all of this results in less time, less self-care, cavities galore, less self-respect because we're not doing a good job at the thing that we sacrificed a huge portion of our youth to be able to do, less meaning at work, relational struggles, and high divorce rates at some, in some residencies, there's bragging about how high the divorce rates are. I don't think we want to swim in that water. Worse health, higher suicide rate. And what this is culminating in is the investment in medicine not being worth it, and overall worse lives. So you can see that there's very different stakes in terms of why we care about this versus why the hospital might care about this. And so that results in commodified wellness. And that's kind of what this talk is. My thesis is sort of that I want this talk to be the anti-commodified wellness. So what we have currently, there's some good that's come of it, right? So there's some workout rooms. I've been enjoying that in my setting. Less silencing of suffering doctors. But mostly what we get is practice efficient wellness. So we're not going to give you more time to be well. We're not going to actually do any kind of change in your patient load. We're just going to tell you that yoga exists And then somehow that's supposed to make you well. And so that results in a lot of mocking and a lot of anger and a lot of people who are being forced to sit through wellness talks, and they'd rather just get that time off and be able to go home and do whatever they're going to do, which might not be yoga, and that's okay. We're also told to work smarter and not harder. My thoughts on this is, I think we're pretty smart already. And if that was really so possible, we would have done it, and it feels condescending. We are also given wellness apps like the Calm app or Headspace, which are great, but they don't come as a replacement for actually doing real things that would change massive structural problems that are causing us to have twice the suicide rate of everyone else. So the solutions here we have to accept that, we signed up for this. It's a great job. It comes with some big problems, and we can't expect the hospitals. The hospitals are going to do what's in their best interest, and that makes sense for them to do that. And we have to do what's in our best interest. And so there needs to be some sort of a realism here. So first off, instead of working smarter, not harder, I would replace that with cut, don't optimize. So if you have 5 things to do and you're trying to figure out how to do them smarter, I would say maybe consider not doing 3 of them. And of course, that has that challenge of, well, what if it results in decreased patient care? And so, yeah, we have to kind of look hard to find those things. Transitioning our identities from proving ourselves as doctors to advocating for ourselves, knowing our worth as doctors who are good doctors, and not doing things that are ridiculous to ask of us simply because we're trying to prove ourselves. Ambition in medicine being redirected to ambition in undernourished areas like our love lives or our physical wellness lives, or whatever. We're going to talk about kind of different spheres that we could nourish. But really shifting that ambition to no longer making one's identity about being the best doctor possible. We've spent the last 15 years doing that. It's time to feel good about being a doctor. Organizing. So there are countries now where nurses make more than doctors. They're well organized, they're unionized, but it doesn't necessarily just mean unions, right? It means power in, let's say if you're co-residents, or people working together in a small practice, 3 people having the same concern and coming respectfully to the boss about it looks very different than 1 person having that concern. In addition, by talking to your peers and organizing, you can have new ideas, you can learn how they do things, and you can also be accountable to each other. So if you say you're actually going to kind of get the guts up to do something about your work circumstances, you're going to have someone looking at you and saying, well, did you actually do it? And kind of have to suffer that collective embarrassment if you're not doing anything about your current circumstances. Obviously, in groups, it's also less scary and more powerful. Don't let good enough make you complacent. So there are some changes being made. We get the Calm app, we do get some nice changes, but they're nowhere near enough for the problems that doctors are facing, the stress levels that doctors are facing. So don't let that keep you from putting the energy into advocating for yourself in meaningful, high yield ways. And then another kind of simple idea is involving patients in charting. And so if we have to chart, explaining to the patient that, hey, this dot phrase is a tool to help you be safe, to help me not miss any important things in your care, to help me kind of go through all of the things and not let our conversation go too astray so that I miss some important things that are going on. And saying, I'm going to occasionally be typing during this. That's because I want to get down what you're saying in your words and not forget things. And I'm going to occasionally be looking at my screen because I want to be able to read important things that were said about you. This does come with a sacrifice in patient care, and it has to be your decision whether you're doing this or not. But if we're going to be asked to see patients throughout the day, remember those patients, and then do the increasingly bloated amount of meaningful usage, epic work or Cerner work or whatever we're doing, this may be the only way to really do this and feel good about our work and finish our workday on time And I'm currently doing it, and I think patients appreciate it. I can kind of summarize what the patient said by saying, so let's see if this is what you're saying. And then I'll type and I'll speak. So patient states that they're frustrated at home because their leg has been hurting, and the patient hears it and they're willing to, at the very least, deal with it. And at the very most, they kind of like it because it forces us to summarize their statements more. They also know what's going in their chart, which I think a lot of people appreciate and is good practice for this era of open notes laws. So the last one is set boundaries like you would with your patients, but with your employers. So we all get very good at setting boundaries with a patient who is, on Beer's list and on Ativan or something like that. We need to get that good at talking to our employer, saying, I need this, I respect the situation, but I need this because otherwise I'm going to be burnt out. And I know you want me doing my best work. So this is the visible light spectrum. I'm comparing this to the spectrum of human behaviors. And there's cultures all over the world with different behaviors, I think many of which are vibrant and exciting and adaptive. And I would like to think from maybe a cultural relativist perspective that the range of valuable behaviors is evenly and equally distributed along this spectrum. So meaning that there may be great behaviors to borrow from lots of different places on the spectrum. And if you look at graduate students, they are delving into all different types of reading. They're reading about philosophy and mathematics, and they have these salons where they talk to each other, and the cognitive neuroscience people are talking to the art people. And then if you look at medicine, this is kind of what we're doing. So if you want to work out, on your lunch break, that could be unprofessional because people might see you a little bit red or sweaty. And if you want to kind of like express some of your outside of work interests at work, that might give you a kind of a strange eye from an attending. And we're taught, we're under the microscope and in training and being evaluated for so long that this doesn't become a chore that we overcome and then forget about. This actually gets to be kind of sclerosed into our personality. And that's a very small range of choices of adaptive behaviors. And work is a huge part of our life. So kind of my answer to this, or my hypothesis answer to this, is question professionalism. So this is a quote from a mentor of mine. When I give presentations, I try really hard to make myself sound not like myself. And so what she was noticing was just how stifling the culture of professional presentations is, where you're trying to make yourself sound so fact-based and so objective that no personality can be injected to it. And you have this real code switch when you get to work. You take off your self cap and you put on your doctor cap. And the self cap tends to include a lot of the fun stuff, and the doctor cap doesn't allow all that stuff. And we spend a lot of our life at work, and that's a hell of a way to spend a time when we're not allowed to wear a fun cap. So questioning the code switch and questioning all of the different things we're letting go and whether they actually have to be let go of. So with less identity fragmentation at work comes more fun and less role strain, and I would venture to say less burnout. So some examples for how to express your best self into your practice are humor. So this is an interesting one. Women that express humor in the workplace are more likely to be seen as unprofessional, and men who express humor in the workplace are more likely to be promoted. So I think it's clear that we all have a duty to back up and kind of yes and support women who use humor in the workplace, partly because that's just what's just, and partly because women not having humor and not using humor in the workplace means 50% of the workplace with less humor. None of us want that. Playfulness. So much of the things that we kind of make us charming in our normal personality and would be great for building rapport, we don't feel we can do in the interaction with the patient or with our attendings or bosses or whatever. So my thought is question every moment where you might be tempted to be playful and you're not. And if you've been a doctor for a long, long time, maybe try to think of what playfulness is in your normal life that you aren't bringing in. Tell patients when they inspire us. I think there's this weird dynamic where we are supposed to be the teacher and we can never learn from the patients. And it can be very empowering to remember that we're coming to work and our patients are incredible, powerful people, and we can voice to them that they inspire us, both for rapport, but also to remind ourselves that we're having a good time at work and we're learning from these people. Fascination. So a lot of us went into medicine partly because we're fascinated with medical science, and that doesn't seem to gel so well with professionalism. Geeking out in a patient session doesn't have to be unprofessional. Wow, it's so amazing that you were able to lower your A1C, talking about how fascinating the kidney is in a way that, just kind of reminds you why you're here and maybe gets the patient excited about what they've done as well. And then anytime you're censoring yourself, just questioning it. That includes clothing. So I have this picture of a kind of vacation shirt, and my parents' PCP wears these vacation shirts, and it just allows him to include some of his kind of the things he loves and his charm into his work. I think that's a really nice idea. I've also seen people who bring their favorite objects into practice, whether those be Star Wars toys or whatever, and they have them on their shelves. And I think you don't have to be a pediatrician to do that. Okay, so obviously the biggest problem in our culture is the workload. So some thoughts. Before I was a doctor, I worked as a behavior therapist, and I was reading a book by Tim Ferriss called The 4-Hour Workweek. Tim Ferriss is this guy who some people think is great and some people think is a jerk. And the book is basically about fending for yourself in a world where your employer doesn't care about you, and trying to automate your work week. He has these examples he has these kind of assignments he gives you, like set an email reminder saying, I no longer check email, period. If you would like to contact me, please call me. And just having that going. And then having a whole day or a whole week where you say no to every single thing that is asked of you. Now, what I learned very quickly being in healthcare and doing that was that I wasn't able to actually complete these assignments because I care about my patients and I want to do a good job and I care about my team. And what starts to become evident is you have this kind of divide and conquer thing where the hospital or the employer gets to fragment. Instead of it being a clear relationship of they're asking more from me and I'm asking to do less, it gets put on this complex relationship where if you do less, don't think about us. You're hurting patient care, or you're hurting your team, and they're going to have to absorb your work. And this is a really nice strategy to basically stop people from complaining and have them just do what they're told. And so that's part of the reason that unifying is important, but it's also a reason to question which things can be cut rather than optimized, and really kind of be brave in terms of saying that you don't want to do something, understanding that it will affect patient care, and bringing that to whoever's in charge of it in a way that I don't want to do this anymore and I need it to not affect patient care. How can you support me in my need to be living a balanced and good life? So in terms of balanced and good life, this was made by SAMHSA. This is kind of the elements of wellness. And you'll see here, I think if you kind of look at the bottom one being the blue bottom, occupational, and then top left or kind of side left, intellectual, and then top or side right, financial. We have this it kind of like makes a radioactive symbol. Those are the ones that I think physicians tend to be doing well in. And then all of the other ones, well, you decide for yourself. So if you kind of look at these and think of a few you might want to improve in, you can kind of conceptualize how your priorities and values might differ from your daily short-term goals. At the end of the day, or at the end of life is just a series of days. And if our daily goals don't align with our more important priorities and values, no one's going to say, hey, let me make up for all the time you took doing a really good job on answering your in basket. And so I think it's important to think about our goals, think about whether they are extending into kind of like no longer being useful, being almost vestigial. Some of our goals of aggrandizing our professional reputation that no longer matter, but we're still saying yes to things that we didn't mean to say yes to, or other similar things. And then thinking about what would need to happen to change it so that our goals were actually more in line with the values we want to cultivate and the priorities that we have in this life. So, do our goals align with our priorities and values? And if not, how much is that affecting us? How much time are we losing doing a great job on things we never wanted to do? Let's say you're the safety officer because you were voluntold to do so, but you're not getting paid for that. Let's say you are I'm the research coordinator for my residency, and I sort of enjoy it, but I'm sort of not sure why I'm doing it. We really need to think about these things and how much time they're actually, how much time they're taking from us, and how much of that is because of some vestigial ego stuff that we don't need anymore. So this is Tyler Durden. This is from Fight Club. And this is something I often think about when we do motivational interviewing. So, we as doctors are trained to do motivational interviewing, where if the patient's not ready for change, we just kind of allow them to not be ready for change. And it's great for us because if they're not ready for change, then, we can finish the session a little bit shorter and push it off till next time. What Tyler Durden does is he takes this guy, Raymond K. Hessel. Brad Pitt is Tyler Durden. He takes Raymond K. Hessel. This is a scene in Fight Club. He's a convenience store clerk, and he pulls him out, and he has a gun, and he points the gun at his head, and he says, "What did you want to do with your life?" And Raymond K. Hessel says, "I wanted to be a veterinarian." And Brad Pitt says, "Why are you not a veterinarian?" And Raymond K. Hessel says, "It was too hard." And Brad Pitt takes his driver's license and he says, "I know where you live, and I'm going to come back in 6 months. And if you're not on your way to being a veterinarian, I'm going to kill you." And I wish, that something like this could somehow be applied to real life in a way that wasn't ridiculous. Because what this brings us is perspective. This brings us that deathbed perspective of this guy is thinking about, he really thinks he's going to die in this moment. And he's thinking about what didn't he get to do. And Brad Pitt really forces him to kind of think, to really take some moments to think about all the things he didn't get to do. And then it's the motivation of knowing that he's going to come back and he's going to kill me if I don't do what I'm doing. So I'd love to just kind of have a metaphor. Just think of me right now with a gun pointing it at your head. Like, if you're not living your best life within the next 6 months to a year, I'm going to kill you. And if that image is helpful, you're welcome to hold on to it. So I think that the call to action here is the bucket list stuff. So that deathbed perspective, right? We lost so much time throughout the medical training process, and we think of ourselves as high paid, but we have to think about the numerous hours that we were putting in our initial investments. And what were other people doing that we weren't doing? And what did they learn from those experiences that we haven't learned? And kind of actively making up for that, even if we're in a rush to start a family or whatever, thinking about, well, have I backpacked Europe sufficiently? Have I backpacked Asia sufficiently? Have I invested in self-actualization? And then this thing about family and friends, there's so many different adages within medicine that are like, they say like family, guilt. Do you want to like have a good, do you want to be bored? Do you want to be guilty? And then they say like, pick which one you'd rather have. And it doesn't need to be like that, especially now. doctors have increasing flexibility to do non-traditional, workday schedules. And it should be something you hold yourself accountable to spend ample time with both friends and family. There's this whole idea that adults don't have friends, and I certainly don't want to be one of those people. We medicine is powerful, and it kind of carries us forward, and it's almost like a river we just kind of get stuck in. And if you aren't careful, you could have a lot of regrets. So on that note, overshooting money. How much money do you want to make? And might it be worth having a few less extra things or fancy things, which have been shown not to actually confer increased happiness, and thinking more about time, not money. So part-time, or taking more time, like extensive time between jobs, and investing our money in experiences rather than things. So I encourage everyone to look into the FIRE movement. That stands for financial independence, retire early. And then that first thing, financial conformism, really question the things that you're getting. Maybe the especially with cars and stuff. Are we doing this because of some thought that we need to appear professional? Is this actually worth the enormous amount of vacation time, or less work, or like a half year part-time that we could have instead of this added thing? So bargaining. I'd love to, maybe I'll have it at the end, but I'd love to have other people who maybe have more experience with this than me contribute at the end. But things we can bargain for when negotiating our contract, or when joining up with fellow coworkers. So pay for more vacation. A lot of academic institutions allow for that, where you can have pay deducted for increased vacation time over what was in your contract. Later start dates are so easy, and they allow you to really have like more vacation than we as doctors have ever experienced, and that might be scary. Taking 5 or 6 months off, you might actually realize that you want to make a whole lot more changes in your life. And less work, obviously. So what that can look like is, less work literally, but also, let's say you cut your commute off by working from home. Let's say you are able to do notes outside on a laptop, and that makes you feel better about things. Let's say that you just don't have an office with windows, or you're in some kind of a basement in the ED, and you want to be able to do some of your work in an office with windows. A workout room, so that you don't feel super strange and judged when you just want to, tend to your physical wellness. More help. So secretaries actually finding out, when you are negotiating your contract, what does the administrative support look like, and how many kind of the administrative pool are devoted to helping me and my colleagues, and what days will they be there, and when will they arrive? And then more control. And that brings me to control. So this is one of the predictors of physician burnout, is a lack of control over schedule. And asking to be able to control also can allow you to strategize your day so that you can make the things in your life that you want to work. If you do happen to have night shift or night call, get off. It's highly neurotoxic. Learn how to use blue blocking glasses, which there's a emerging huge body of evidence for their efficacy. And then learn about Zeitgebers and other sleep hygiene things that will make it so that your night shift is less neurotoxic. And we have a few episodes of our podcast that we've done about kind of figuring these things out, and I'll share them in the chat, but I don't want to belabor it now. These are my references. Thank you so much for listening. And I'd love to discuss if folks have thoughts.
Sorry, I was trying to get back on here. Oh my goodness, that was so fascinating. You hit on so many hot topics. I was like trying to engage people in chat, like, oh my goodness, what do you think about this? And everybody is being so shy tonight. One thing I found really fascinating was you talking about, negotiating for a better schedule, less pay for a better schedule. And that is something that I've definitely seen happening more often as I talk to friends in the recruiter world. I'm definitely seeing people start to negotiate, for more vacation time, or being willing to take $30,000 to $40,000 less in their annual salary to know what time they're going to go home. So seeing some interesting shifts there. Have you heard of other friends talking about that and actually negotiating that in their contract?
Yeah, including so sometimes in the form of administrative time, and that can be for kind of unnamed personal projects. And then it sort of has to do with, I think, how it's written into, I don't know whether it's HR or what the organization, kind of the organization code is for being able to make it happen, but it can be like there's these different schedules, like where you work 4 days a week and do 10 hours a day, and then, which isn't actually like a decrease in time, but then there's the administrative time things can amount to basically getting paid full time for a 20-hour week job with 20 hours of administrative time, sometimes which might involve teaching or other projects, but often it's just kind of they don't specify, and you can just live your life.
That is interesting. Okay, and then I have another question. I heard the blue blocking glasses. What was that third thing you said? I've never heard of that. Zeitgeibers? Saying
Yeah,
it
yes.
right?
So Zeitgeibers it's a German word for givers of time. And so these are things that the brain kind of holds on to really tightly to determine not just when we should be sleeping and awake, but also how our metabolism should work, how our blood pressure should work. There's all kinds of things that the brain is supposed to be changing between day and night. And if you work night shifts, those things get really, really messed up. And it's a big problem. And for some of our psychiatric patients, it can actually cause bipolar disorder, manic episodes, and cause like major mental health disasters. But for a person without bipolar disorder, it can cause increased proclivity to stroke and heart attack, and other really bad things, dementia, depression, and these kind of like permanent sleep-wake disorders end up being really, really damaging.
Wow, I had no idea. That is new information, very educational. So I saw a lot of comments, a lot of people saying like, this is interesting. They seem to find it very informative. Before we go, does anyone else have any more questions for Dr. Atkins? I'm not seeing any yet. I do want to address this question about the gift card. So you guys, I do mention this throughout that we do offer free educational webinars for physicians. There's no incentive for attending these though. You do get a $25 gift card for attending career fairs if you're a resident or fellow, but not the webinars. All right. Well, if no one else has any questions, Dr. Atkins, did you want to share a link to your webinar in the chat?
Sure.
That way everybody can follow you. So he's going to share that in the chat now. If you enjoyed this webinar, I definitely would say you should check out Dr. Atkins' podcast, Let's Get Psyched. Be sure to mark your calendars for our upcoming webinars on May 10th. We have immigration, everything you need to know about J1 waivers, and May 31st, we have physician compensation, knowing your worth, and negotiating your contract. So we hope to see you there. Good night, everyone. And again, Dr. Atkins, thank you so much for your time. You hit some really interesting topics and made me think, I'm like, do I code switch when I come on and I'm reading my little script? I think I do. I'm gonna have to watch that. All right, everybody have a fantastic night.
Thanks, everybody.